Shalom. First off, I want to give all honors, all glory, and all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Raha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone GMS and Ruel Shalom, to the elect of Israel, beginning with the 144,000. And to all you Akim and Akwaf tuning in, may this lesson be edifying to you. This is the brother Halal from the Great Millstone Chicago camp, coming at you with another lesson. And this is a lesson going into, the wickedness of Esau Edom, who was the head nation ruling Babylon the Great, aka America, and what the modern Babylonian is going through, under this man's unrighteous and oppressive system. So I'm going to let this video play. It's a video on TikTok by this page called Distorted Hipsy. And may this lesson be edifying to the elect.
I'm gonna say this one time real loud with my full chest, so go ahead and hear me out on this one. If working is mandatory, if labor is something we are required to do in order to prove we deserve our existence, if we have no choice but to choose an occupation whether or not we want it, if you are forcing me to sell my body to do somebody else's labor and telling me I have no other choice and neither does anyone else, you shouldn't have any other choice but to give us a roof over our heads, food for our stomachs, and whatever else we need to survive! If you want us to be forced to work, but do not want to guarantee life necessities, that is slavery, you fuckwads! This country loves slavery, they just rebranded it! And don't tell me to leave! I would if I had the fucking money! But that's the whole point of this system, you dumb fucks! Fuck this country!
And everything that man said was completely on point. Even though he might be an Edomite, I perceive, according to the spirit, that he could be from Esau Edom. But nonetheless, everything he said was completely on point. This system is essentially impossible to live in, unless you're the few wealthy ruling class of America. But the average Babylonian, man, that they're putting in, what 40-hour weeks just to barely be able to make ends meet, man. And still struggling to feed their family and put food on the table. So this is a completely unrighteous, morally unethical system, and it's about to go down. But I want to start this off with the book of Proverbs, chapter 22 and 16, and it says, "He that oppresseth the poor to increase his riches, and he that giveth to the rich shall surely come to want." And that's ultimately, what this system is about. And that's how Babylon the Great America was established. In particular, it was established off the blood of the Israelites, beginning with the northern kingdom. They were brought into captivity and completely ethnically cleansed from America by Esau Edom. And eventually, the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, which makes up the so-called Negroid tribes. The Negroes being from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin being what you would call the West Indies of Jamaicans, and Levi being the Haitians, they were all brought here from the west coast of Africa, and had to build up America for free. You can do your research, man. The Judites, slave labor is what led to the implementation and the building of the White House. So I want to go into this word want in the concordance. And the word want is the Hebrew word is mahasawar, and it means need, poverty, or a thing that is needed, lacking, wants, in need or poverty. So a nation that's established on blood that oppresses the poor in order to increase their riches and their stability, eventually they're going to come to poverty, man. And that's what we see unfolding right now in front of us. That's why Donald Trump just signed that new Genius Act, which is the next step closer to a completely cashless society. in which the government will have full surveillance of your bank account and every transaction that you make, man. But that's how the system is established, man. Oppression, rape, robbery, murder, and slavery. And the modern people of America are finding that out. Because the slavery is no longer physical, it's mental. So I want to play this video from Instagram. It's from this page called Conspiracy Peter. It's one of them, one of those AI generated pages, but nonetheless, listen to what Peter is saying from Family Guy. It's kind of funny, but it's a lot of truth to it, So I'm going to let this video play.
They don't need prisons anymore. They gave you credit cards, mortgages, contracts, and you begged for them.
Come on, debt just means you get a house, a car, a better life.
No, debt means you don't own your life. You lease your future. And the chains? You sign them yourself. Mortgage, from the French mortgage, death pledge. It ends when you die, or they take it back.
So, it's not just money. It's a ritual?
Look around. 70% of Americans live in debt. 8 out of 10 report financial stress. Most will never own what they pay for. That's not economics. That's spiritual warfare.
But isn't this just how the system works?
Yes, because debt equals obedience. You don't quit your job, you don't speak up. You don't rebel when you owe them everything. The average American now owes $59,580. With interest, they'll repay over $100,000. On a $300,000 house, you pay $500,000 plus dollars back. That extra $200,000, that's the chain.
But why all the pageantry? Why the signatures, the suits, the ceremonies?
Because that's how you seal a ritual. With your hand, with your name, with your face, and then you celebrate your chains.
Jesus. They really traded freedom for comfort.
No, they traded it for illusion, and now they call the leash a lifestyle.
So there you have it, man. Not only was Babylon the Great established on slavery and genocide, but now the modern Americans that live here, that established, that have homes and apartments, they are working themselves down to the bone in order to pay off debts, man. He said that 70% of Americans are in debt and 8 out of 10 are struggling financially, and stressing out about the economic stability of Babylon the Great. And it's ultimately all by design, man, in order to keep the rich richer and the poor poorer. Like I just read in Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 16. So it's all being done by design. It's being done intentionally in order to make you into a debt slave, from the youth all the way up into adulthood. Let's go to the book of Sirach, chapter 10, in verse 3. Matter of fact, I started at verse 1. It says, a wise judge will instruct his people. The government of a prudent man is well ordered. So a wise judge is going to know how to rule a nation properly, and pass forth fair laws, that people can abide by, so that they can actually have some form of peace and stability. Verse 2, it says, as the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers. And what manner the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein. It says, an unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. And that's what we see unfolding right before us, man. We're seeing the unwise king destroying the people, financially. Now you got Americans on TikTok and other social media apps crying and talking about how hard it is. People offing themselves. And it's only going to get worse, man. This is the beginning of the sorrows and plagues that are coming upon Babylon the Great, man. Next scripture I want to get is Psalms. The book of Psalms, chapter 37, in verse 14. And it says, the wicked have drawn out their sword and have bent their bow to cast down the poor and the needy and to slay such as be of upright conversation. So not only are the rich trying to eat up the poor, they're also, trying to come for the man of the Lord. Those that abide by the law and the wisdom of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Because wickedness is in control of this earth right now. Therefore, everything that's righteous is looked at in a wicked light. Let's get that in the book of Isaiah, Let's see, what sinner against the godly? Let's see. Yeah, this is the book of Sirach, chapter 33 and verse 13. It says, as the clay is in the potter's hand to fashion it at his pleasure, so man is in the hand of him that made him to render to them as liketh him best. So the Lord is ultimately, the potter, and we represent his creations upon the earth, whether we're being used for a good or evil purpose. The elect, they are the creation, they are the vessels of honor in Esau, Edom, and the heathen, they are the vessels of dishonor on the earth. Verse 14, it says, good is set against evil, and life against death. So is the godly against the sinner, and the sinner against the godly. And we live in a kingdom, where sin is magnified on a high level. Therefore, you have people complaining, about how hard it is to live and feed their children, and they're targeting old, young, women. Donald Trump taking away food stamps and EBTs. People are being affected by this, man. And there's really nothing that they can do about it because it's all set up by design, man. From the youth up, the majority of Americans were taught on how to be subservient, how to be a servant to the system, so that they don't rebel against the evil, tyrannical government that rules over them, man. They don't have no morals. They blindly follow false leaders. They give them false hopes, but do the complete opposite of what they say. It says, verse 15, so look upon all the works of the Most High, and there are two and two, one against another. And that's the time frame that we're in. We're in the time frame of the sinner being magnified in the earth against the godly. Why do you think they all of a sudden, after years of Trump's people talking about releasing the Epstein files, now all of a sudden they're claiming that there is no files, man, because evil has been magnified in the earth, and these wicked, evil people, that commit these crimes against humanity and against children and the vulnerable, they have the power to be able to get away with their wickedness, man. Let's get that Psalm 73. In verse 5, it says, matter of fact, I started at verse 3. And this is King David speaking. It says, for I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. And in the NLT, it says, they seem to live such painless lives, their bodies are so healthy and strong. Because these elites, in this world, they have access to the best delicacies that the average American doesn't have access to, whether it be food, generational wealth, clothing. They don't consume the same things that the modern American consumes. Verse 5, it says, they are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Right, so they can get away with a lot of the crimes that they commit. And since they control the media, once you call them out for the wicked behavior, they can actually defame your image and defame your character, even though you're speaking the truth on their actions, man. Verse 6, therefore pride compasseth them as a chain, violence covereth them as a garment. So since they can get away with so many things in the world, they commit more crime, more atrocities, because they know that nobody can really do anything about it because they have the power. But that power is about to be stripped away from them. That's why Babylon the Great is falling the way that it is, man. We are seeing the end of an empire, the same way that the Egyptian empire fell, the Greek empire, the Roman empire, and now the empire of Babylon the Great. The main stronghold that Esau, Edom, is the primary ruler of. So I'm going to end this off with the book of Amos, chapter 9. And I'll start at verse 11. And it says, and in that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up its ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. So the Lord is going to magnify the elect, the chosen in the house of David, man. You know, verse 12, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, which are the people ruling the day, aka the so-called white man or the white race, and all the heathen which I call by my name, saith the Lord that doeth this. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him that sows seed, and the mountains shall drop sweet wine, and all the hills shall melt. So eventually, the Lord is going to return. Yahweh Shai is going to make his grand second return and overtake Esau, Edom, man. You know, so I hope this lesson was edifying. With that, I want to give all honor, all glory, and all praises to Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, by Hashem HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone GMS. Shalom, Kwam Yasharala, Wa Ba Babal.